Well, I come from Muskowgan First Nations, and my mom was a residential school survivor from there. And because of her traumas, she wasn't able to raise us, so I was put into the system at an early age, and I was adopted at 4, so I was a part of the 60s scoop. And um, back then, there wasn't any Indigenous people in my community of Regina. That's where I lived. So um, at a young age, I had a hard time finding out who I was. I didn't know my identity. I grew up with a lot of trauma. I didn't understand what that was. Uh, so it was very easy for me to, once I was put in to a Native girls' home, at the age of 13, it was very easy for me to be, I was very vulnerable, and it was very easy for me to be sexually exploited. So I was sexually exploited at that age, and which is very common, unfortunately, for Indigenous girls. The common age is, right now, it's age of entry is 12. So, and obviously our Indigenous girls are coming from communities because we were all put on to reservations. At one time, our ancestors were put onto reservations. So we all come from a community. And so a lot of the people that I knew on the streets, they were all Indigenous, not very many other nationalities. And right now, even though we only make up, over 4% of the Indigenous the Indigenous women and girls, we represent 51% that are sexually exploited in Canada. So, I wrote my book. It's about my life, and the reason I wrote it was because I know that it's not an easy subject to talk about, but it's a lot of Indigenous girls and women can identify to my story. In with whether they've been exploited, whether they've been in domestic abusive relationships, whether they've been in residential schools or part of the 60s scoop, or just in the welfare system, and aging out. So when I aged out, at 16 from, being awarded the government, I was pretty much on my own because I didn't have a family. I didn't know my biological family from being adopted, and my adopted family, I didn't have any relationships with them. So I was also a mom at 17. By the time I was 19, I had 3 kids. So that was another thing, being in an abusive relationship, and then fleeing with my 3 children, going to, I went to Edmonton, so it's a big city, suffering from addictions. When I did meet my bio brother, he was into the gangs and, that lifestyle, so it was very easy for me to get into that again, So just always living, running away from something, but having nowhere to run to. I was constantly just in a lost state, and then losing my children to social services, and that cycle repeating again, so I was told on numerous occasions, you're gonna die young, you're not gonna live till you're past 30. That sticks in my head, and I OD'd multiple times. I, I was extremely suicidal, but something I was told when I was young was that, just because of who you are and the color of your skin, when you die, you're gonna burn in hell. So that kept me alive, even though it was a negative thing, that did keep me alive. And, so being on the, you know, I end up losing my kids, being on the streets in Edmonton on Skid Road. There's a lot of lost sisters, brothers. But, we were family. We were family out there. And, when we talk about missing and murdered Indigenous women and, even our two spirits, I can relate to that because, those are my family. And, I have sisters that were murdered and that have gone missing that have still never been found. And, going to Vancouver East Hastings, just living that violent life, and it's hard to even call it a life because it was just pure survival. There's no, you wake up to get high and you go to bed, still high, and it was just a cycle. Because you don't know who you are, and for myself, there was times when I slept in the parks, just pure survival. Stood in the soup kitchen lines getting sandwich, and I guess one of the turning points in my life was I was just about murdered myself, and just living with, running from that, and living with all of this, anger and hatred and shame, because when you're out there, people don't look at you like you're a human being. They look at you like, you're just wasted energy, like, what are you even doing here, go kill yourself, oh, you're never gonna change. And you believe it, right? So, I'm very fortunate that, I had an awakening where I was told by someone that, you either, pick your kids or you pick that lifestyle, you pick the drugs. And for a lot of people, they would, look at that and it'd be just common sense. But if you were never told encouraging words ever, so when I came to that, that I'll never forget that conversation, and that's what helped me turn my life around. And I didn't want to be a statistic. I didn't want to be just another Indigenous woman, that was murdered. So I did turn my life around, and I've been about 20 years. I've been working on myself. I have, I have 7 children. They all did come back home to me. And one thing that I wanted my children to experience was, I wanted them to know that I love them, that they could talk to me about anything, that there's supports out there for them, that they weren't alone. I wanted my kids to graduate high school so they experienced, that part of their life. I didn't want my kids to be in gangs. I didn't want my kids to be sexually exploited, because I know the harm that carries. You carry for the rest of your life, no matter how much healing you do. It's still there. The PTSD, the anxiety, it doesn't go away. You have really good days, but there's triggers all the time. So my kids, my youngest is 21, and they're all living good lives, and I wrote my book because I wanted women that were sitting in jail to be able to, have this book and say, hey, I can relate to this, and you know what, if she can get out, so can I. In treatment centers or places in small communities like this, it's all relatable, And one thing about Indigenous women is that we're very strong women, and I see that, in so many women. And nowadays the women especially are really starting to stand up and and we need more of that, and we need to prevent, these things happening to our girls, because it's a lot better for them to learn about it at a young age instead of having to go through it and then have to deal with all of the trauma and if one person reads my book and it helps them change their life, I think of myself. I'm one person, but I have 7 children, and I have 6 grandchildren, and 1 more on the way. And my grandchildren will not be in foster care, and they know. Of course, none of us are perfect, but my grandchildren and my children know that there's supports out there, that I'm there, and so that's 14. Is that 14 people? Yeah, 14 people that are not in the system. And it's going to keep going like that, and that's what my book is about. It's about hope, and it's about just I didn't write it for myself. It wasn't easy to write, but I think that was one of the gifts that I was given to be able to give to our people, right? Is this book. And I think when I think of, especially now, with social media, it's very easy for our young, and it's not only girls, it's our young boys, it's our young two-spirited, to get wrapped up in social media, and for someone to message them and say, hey, beautiful, and hitting that vulnerability in them where they're wanting that love and that affection, and they can find it so easy, and then that we wonder why our kids want to leave our communities and go to the big cities. But Saskatchewan, we have so many reserves, and like I said, our Indigenous women and our girls are we're preyed upon, and there's no other way to put it, by everyone. It's and I don't know if I even want to say this, but it's not like we talk about like the pimps or the boyfriends that are putting the girls in the streets. Well, we have to think of what gets them there, right? And a part of my story is that my kids were taken from me on false pretenses the last time they were taken. So the social workers, they're part of that. Not believing us, believing in our change, believing in, and how can we believe in ourselves if those that are supposed to help us aren't helping us, but they're doing the same things. And so we go and we fall into these, pimps' arms, and then we're looked upon like, why can't you change? But yet when change is happening, it's not taken serious. So there's a lot of change that has to be done, not only like I can come out and talk about what's going on, but it's the people that are working with our youth, when we see something that doesn't seem right, like with our children, with the teacher, if the teacher sees one of their youth is starting to change their personality or whatever, like we have to be able to have those hard conversations. Then there has to be supports in the community, and because our children aren't joining gangs because it's a fun thing to do. They're looking for acceptance. They're looking for a family, a community, and unfortunately it looks really attractive until you're right into it. And yeah.
And as we heard today, I guess it's the money that's the easy way to make a profit, from these organized gangs, from doing drugs, jumping into human trafficking or sexual exploitation. How do we, how can we as communities prepare for this, or I don't know what to ask even.
Yeah.
It's
So I think one thing is the awareness, right? So now, like your community, whoever was in there is aware that this is real and that this is happening. So as a community, we have to invest in our youth, and it's the emotional part. So, one thing, your kids are sitting at home on social media all day, right? We have to find different outlets for them. I don't know what your community offers, but like kids, our kids are really good at sports too. Like, sports was, for me, that was my escape. And if someone would have just invested in me and, saw my potential, because I know I was good. Like, I'm not trying to brag or nothing. Like, I was really good in sports. And, just having someone to be there and encouraging me and build up my self-esteem instead of going home and being shot down, and, all this stuff happening at home. And, like, also, you know, for our kids to be able to find out who they are, who am I, whether that's getting into their culture, whatever it is, like, who am I, so they have a sense of identity and a sense of purpose. What do you want to do with your life? What are your dreams, not what is gratification for this moment. It's really investing in our youth, because like we heard today, our kids, are growing up in gangs from diapers, so that's the only life they know. So if that's the way they're growing up and that's all they know, how are they supposed to know any different, right? And we see our youth dying. We see it. Like, I know in Regina, like the last murders, they're all young. Like I think we had a 13-year-old that was murdered. A 14-year-old little girl. They're murdered by gangs. Like, if that's the way they're growing up, not caring about life, we need to let them see their futures, build them up. There's a lot of organizations that are about prevention. So investing them to come out and speak with our youth and do workshops, not where it's like a forced, where they sit there and have to listen to someone, or, it's like, oh my gosh, the day, when will it be over kind of thing, but where they're engaged and where they, because sometimes all it takes is like one thing, someone says one thing, and that can change a person's life. Right. Like I said with mine, you either choose your drugs or you choose your kids. Very simple thing, but that's all I needed to hear. That's probably my phone.
That must be yours, yeah. I guess the other part that is the challenges are in the communities, the families, they're in different statuses of families. But for the youth, is there an opportunity, like, should we empower our youth somehow to fight through this? Like, it's they may not be involved, but to support others. Is there a way that we can do that? Sports is, keeping them active, keeping them positive, a positive lifestyle, but in their own way. What would you recommend for the youth to be aware of or to do, especially the social media world? It's it's in a world of its own. It's
Yeah.
unsupervised, so to speak,
Yeah.
but you need self-discipline, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what would you say to the youth about dealing with those, those pitfalls that
Yeah.
may come to them, but how do they handle it?
Well, one thing that I absolutely believe is that every person has a gift, and it's a matter of finding what that gift is. Some are gifted in sports, some are gifted in writing, some are gifted in music, like arts. It's a matter of them finding their gift and expanding on that. And I don't know how a community would go about it, but some communities you see these kids making videos, you know, like empowerment videos, where they're talking about the drugs and alcohol in their communities, something like that, that really brings those kids together. Our young are, they're really strong, and they are our future. So, like, we have to find however it is to invest in them, because without them, right, where's our next generation? It's honestly about them finding their gifts, because like I said, we all have a gift, and yeah.
Your journey has certainly, brought us to our community to give us a message, and we wanted to grab it here. And we want to thank you and honor you for the family that you've kept intact, that you can see the pride when you talk about that. And I guess in terms of closing, I know authorities, leaders out there are listening, the governments. Is there any missing gaps that we need? I know we have jurisdictional gaps between provincial jurisdiction and federal jurisdiction, but do you see any other opportunities or gaps that we should be focusing on that may make this work a lot better?
Well, there definitely is a lot of gaps. But I think the one most important issue I find is that there's a lot of organizations. There's a lot of places doing a lot of things, but if they did them together, there'd be, I find there would be better outcomes. We don't all have to be, doing the surface work over and over again. There definitely needs to be, more funding for homes for people to go to. So, for instance, in Saskatchewan, a safe home for sexually exploited women and girls to be able to go to is shutting their doors because of no funding, and that's very disheartening because it's needed. So they're having to relocate these ladies who trust this place because, they'd rather not fund it. But people will go sit in a hospital bed beat up, or, being murdered in the investigation. All this could have been, keep these homes open and safe for these women. We have the National Inquiry out for missing and murdered Indigenous women, and it's like, but you're shutting down these homes, right? So there has to be not only like the immediate working together, all of the organizations networking together. There has to be the follow-up. It's not just you get them in a home and then they're gone, if the home's even open, if that makes sense. But it's a lifetime journey, right? Someone doesn't go, isn't an addict for 20 years and go to treatment for 28 days and then expect them to just be good. No, it's a lifetime journey. We're all on a journey of healing, if that's the journey we're on, healing and growing and learning until we, pass away or whatever. But for me, of course, everyone will say it's about funding and stuff, but there's, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's designing our communities to respond to the reality. Today, a rehab is like a post office now.
Mm-hmm.
The addictions are so multi. It's not just drug addiction. There's many addictions, right? So, and the shelters that you talked about, and also healthy homes. We deal with drug addicts or drug dealers here by evicting them.
Mm-hmm.
But they go to mom's place or grandma's place, and it continues. So it's like a cork that keeps popping up. So dealing with that is going to be a challenge, and I'm just impressed with the warrior spirit that you carry, because it's you're facing the world with your truth, and you're also defending the people behind you, and that's, to me, it's just, my heart glows, and I'm glad you survived.
Thank you.
I'm glad you're sharing this story with us, because that's what we want to do, is tell this story so others can make the right decisions, or make the right choice at that time, or be able to say no when the luring is happening. But I never thought it was a Canada-wide problem. A friend of mine tells me, in the Inuit, when they fly their students down from up north, and the pimps in Montreal and Quebec City and Ottawa are at the airports trying to be predators on them. So I thought it was in the movies. I thought, but you bringing it into our community here in this workshop today, we have to face it. It's here, and it's real, and it's really damaging if we let it happen. All right, thank you.
My name is Bonnie Rosteski. I'm from the northern village of Pine House Lake. I am the executive director of North Sask Victim Services Incorporated.
And as part of your program that you have, the workshop that you did today was an awareness on human trafficking, sexual exploitation, and gangs.
Correct.
And maybe just explain to us, from your point of view, the services that you provide, people that find themselves in these hard times of getting addictions and getting in deeper into trouble. How do they reach out to you, and what kind of programs or services can you provide?
Sure. So we were kind of motivated by some of the social issues in some of our communities, and of course Pine House is a neighboring community to Beauval and other communities on the west side. We work closely with the RCMP, so we have the ability to understand and we become aware of some of the issues that are coming up in some of our communities. Part of our mandate from the Ministry of Justice, who funds our program, is to provide education and awareness to the communities as these issues arise. We have seen an uptake in, gangs, drugs, other issues that come with all of that. Human trafficking and sexual exploitation, we felt, was something that was critical for the people to understand what it was. Many times in our northern communities, we don't necessarily call something what it really is. Therefore, we think it's not applicable to us. And that's the case here. We don't even really understand or are aware that, our young people are being exposed to these very dangerous situations. And the association with gangs and the addiction issues that we're facing in our communities all contribute to, having unsafe things occurring in our communities. And so we just wanted to bring that awareness. We were very fortunate to have some expert subject matter guest speakers attend today. as well as the RCMP, who are always eager to be a part of our smaller communities to help contribute to the solutions. North Sask Victim Services becomes aware of these things, as I mentioned, because we work out of the detachments in the North Saskatchewan Administration District. Our central office is located in La Ronge, and we serve 18 detachment areas. We have staff in each of the detachments from Montreal Lake North, east and west to La Loche, Creighton, and then up in the Athabasca region. Essentially, when someone becomes a victim of crime or there's a traumatic event in the community, the RCMP either call us out or bring it to our attention through a referral service. We reach out to the victim and provide numerous types of services. Often, these services are identified by the victim themselves. Some of the other services that we are mandated to provide are support services, advocacy, as well as court support. So we are almost like the liaison between the victim and the justice system at times. So those are kind of some of the services that are provided in many of our small northern communities.
In terms of somebody wanting to reach out either because of an addictive situation or an abusive situation or by calling you and there's a number of phone numbers that we'll provide on here, but these communities that you said there's 18, so it doesn't matter if you're on reserve or off reserve, the jurisdiction doesn't matter with the service?
That's correct, Rick. We service the detachment area. So for example, the main detachment in this area is Beauval, but that detachment area encompasses Pachinak as well as Canoe Lake, Jans Bay, and Coal Bay. So our staff member, which is Lorraine DeRocher for this area, also services those communities. And you're correct, there is no jurisdictional area, whether it's reserve or non-reserve. We service all people.
And the integration with, I guess, local government and health, of course, you're from the justice world, but there's education, there's adult education, so the interagency approach, how do you work with that? How's that, or is that something of a gap where we need to address?
Well, in order to be a part of a community, you need to be a part of a community. So we encourage all staff to attend any prevention meetings, interagency meetings. That's how you're going to understand what the needs are of the community. We really strive to employ people who are members of the community. So when we're seeking to fill a vacancy, one of our priorities is to hire directly from the community when we can. That allows us to carry on traditional values of the community, the language, other belief systems, and it also allows us to know that we're taking a part of that community and building capacity within, which is something that I truly believe that the public awareness and education does all the time. We are the solution to the problems in our communities, not the people that come in on a rotation basis. We're the people who have the solutions and are capable of fixing the problems that exist in our communities. So by bringing public awareness and education, you're building that capacity within the community. Yes, there will always be guidelines and rules and laws and so on and so forth, but it makes more sense for us to solve the problems in our communities as opposed to a politician who's not living in this community or related to anybody here. So we truly believe and strive to always, when we can, employ people that are directly from the community itself.
In terms of the trauma, we talked about with Beatrice, there is an ongoing either relapse in the addictions world or
Right.
or trauma, PTSD from the experiences. How can we address those in our communities? What can we do to continue the support? Once the initial intervention may happen, but
Mm-hmm.
how, is there ways to keep that support going?
Well, I think, first and foremost, historically, there have been a lot of traumas that have been undealt with. Um, there are a lot of burnt bridges and things that need to be repaired. But I think first and foremost, we need to identify what that is. We need to provide healthy solutions for people who are seeking out ways to address their trauma. One thing that Victim Services does is we are a referring agent. So we seek out solutions to the actual problem. So for example, if we're dealing with a client who is a victim of sex assault, we highly encourage them to seek out sex assault counseling as opposed to maybe your local mental health worker who's probably already overwhelmed with many of the situations in their community. We have access to programs like the Victims Compensation Program that we can assist the client to make application to, and if they're approved, some of the financial support can be provided for them to seek out that specialized counseling to address their individual needs.
Yeah, it looks like your plate has been full, Bonnie. I've seen you active in our communities and in other communities as well with the many dynamic challenges we have. To put our finger on one of the issues that was talked about today was meth. Meth has made its way into our communities. It used to be a big city issue,
Right.
way out there. What can you say about this drug that's causing multiple factors to our communities?
It's affecting all of us, right? And I think what we need to remember is for every person who has an addiction issue, they are someone's child. First and foremost, they're human, and we can't force people to get help, but we can certainly make those opportunities available and encourage that. And I think at the end of the day, if we can provide those opportunities in our community where they feel safe to be able to access treatment or whatever it is that they need, then those are some of the things that individually as communities we can do to address some of the problems. At the end of the day, I think people self-medicate however they can to be able to make the hurt go away. And I think that was evident today, with Beatrice Wallace's speech. We all do that. Any one of us can be that person tomorrow. We're only one drink away from becoming an alcoholic or one puff away from becoming, an addicted person to meth or any other kind of substance abuse that's out there. So we need to, those are always going to be there. I recall the sergeant saying today, the drugs aren't going to be here if there isn't a need to fulfill. So if we don't have addicted people, there's not going to be a need for that service. So how do we provide healthier opportunities and encourage our people to reach out and trust and access those programs and other services that are available? And I think the public knowledge, bringing awareness, it helps bring some understanding for some families that may be frustrated in dealing with their own personal situations, or just whatever is going on in our community. And I think it's a responsibility we all have to be able to contribute in some little way. And it's not an easy road, but it's a road that we're all going to have to take. And everyone is worth saving, for sure.
Well, that's almost in closing what we want to say and want to hear from our service providers. And in closing, is there anything that you'd like to share that you think is profoundly needed or profoundly need to be aware of right now?
Well, I think just be aware of what's going on in your community. Everyone has something to contribute. Don't be afraid to reach out and ask for help. Victim services are available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We have numbers which you'll advertise for each of our communities. And we not only accept referrals from RCMP, we accept self-referrals as well. So find out who your service providers are and pick up the phone and call. We're not here to judge, we're here to help.
My name is Jackie Genevieve, and I'm from Clearwater River. I work with North Sask Victim Services. I'm the supervisor for the West Side.
Well, Jackie, in these services, I can't say enough of saying thank you for you providing these services to our young people, because the dangers, we never experienced these dangers of the drugs that are here, the human trafficking that you're talking about, the sexual exploitation. We thought that was far, far away from us. But we're finding out, and you're telling us that this is happening in our villages and in our communities and our family members that are making their way south. So if you can explain to our people, there's people listening across the river here with the language Dene, there's Cree, there's English, however best you can, just speak from the heart and just let people know what's really happening out there and what we're here to try and help.
Don't zina ajana yang tia dani ganda yail tia de edir dani godu zakuyu chala kwasa zidali. But at ora aina ni do tleha ba atamba ho tleha. Athade nuhnia dani tende hunok et tu cholas gats anu hunok et hiring lats andali. Ayer da hi another dani tantlini. Kole adore holusi dan ha hore new tulu dali no hetsi adire dane. But ora anani ho hle ba atamba ho hle. Dani atant hunti go shanla si dani ade human trafficking holisa. Ay Dene hunoko it no hagan tani nara tani del chuhu. De any in ela to yagata sorele ahu tani bakun nahil tani goda bakun hunel yalu. Dog a bana hot home liu, dog a tanit anara auli hakana tade a don't it dana. A yeets anadora au yagadohi a yagaran de la rathanu. Kont u. Aitsi ana bet ina ni dohle huno goats and the hino don't tani doga hiring la chilla data colle a ye cosita liberator I ha ko at your die I thought tani got a toy daily gang members a can't idali I have no has can dali but doil ni ha doa tani got the dali at your tantan beni huli Holy seats adal ni ahu nahile adrenet nedislinu kantu holusita ba kuidali et ido elu bethi kudali adani tanla dani than onkadanga orante li katana thade ai ane a horantelu estili dana kunu nino I North Sask Victim Services can't with dana Kont I harin yao to kont I harathana jau dinga harel inde nuhni asitan kungi si adale dai nu hats a funal yade betsa de diha kuda ha baha al yore elu hook a dog a yahawa lilu dog a pul chule banich or nile naga hare ium bapa hare nade kosiniga ha adire Northern Transportation Initiative fulie editorial au a up kosin Neil T habo asa kudan bashane bets ihu samba bets ihila day class day ni hai ako siniga konti habet already di ho ku adir dan bet inani hotleo der achala kwasu dan got atlarante gang members a year da kolle dan it's a kwasu to chala kwa dan you to zaku to dal I dinga harel harel ya san to ga yawali le tsega harel inde I have a day ho asam ku Zaku the sin collet zaku the hindal like a drillion then you idal agadrillia kutsa kui huka ga harel inde dani yu to beskena sal to beskena di huto da hanti tani shau to de kuder be yu kon si hedide no ni batsare di ho asa ai kon si da hedinal tie ba a do a do ka ya o li ni ga ha safe place anil ti ha ai ha batsare di ho asa ai no ni do ke no ha don la de do ke siltan khuto ase ai adale da a e ko si funa na lade victim services toil li sanu ni dan tsare di ha ai balyo was ti di ni de jinu to thadu to dani thasi adale da a no hakaya tu no hai ideal si ho a ai khan hoi ideal si ai
Just in, you mentioned 5 years of service, right?
Yes.
That you've been, and the pandemic was right in the middle of all of this. But you've seen the lockdown, you've seen the pandemic response, you've seen all the, I guess, activities that have happened up to now. What can you share in terms of your observation the last 5 years? How have our communities slid into this realm of gangs and human trafficking? Just in your 5 years, what have you witnessed?
Doa son la nane adra a last night. Doa ta na the norin there. Ayer koe tane hut other tsare dilulu hunok aboro eleni. Ku ayer koe ayo yaya adir dandaral aidan sitse delu sanilarant au eti ho astua jasa. Ai adur sakwazi dalibets an at ihadoni eliu takwazu chalakwasal eti ho astua jo. Ai onka tsare dili kornu hi ai abet tsare di ha ho asa hunok dali nilye ha dali. Ai has ayer doita tanori dro yaya. Althade tani tsare di de bangani de rustunhu tan tsare di na kol tuan ai no hato no hanal tando a holu tani holu ka bo enli chansani be ni huli a be ya ti adalni ai a holu tan tsare di ha ho a aya ai za aya ai alhadun ayu alhadun lan sa ta utan tsate ti ai tata no mi dro ya aya ai azan na zulant asa because ai hadaril tanu althade a jones in cloths anu to hukats am dan hatede kosi beshenin naga kosini ga tu betsenani kudo ada tanari do kasich a henni hili aya chansam beni huli a hu thobe ya yeti a hu tho adan tsanani ha ho a holu siba ba rint a hanan leo babani tela na leo de hagai ha.
Just as our communities are developing, a lot of our capacity building is taking place to address these new dangers or threats. What are the basics that we need in our communities, small or large? Like we have police departments, we have fire departments, addictions, counselors. What do you see that all our communities require at this time to address this stuff?
Adur no hananik etahu a ega no haras kare. Kuda nelsi tanu zinku tan hayalti tanu holsi tanu hetsinla. Kola adur daitan holano haninte luhuno gotsi a. Nuhni no hananu nuhni no hakun esi se hilye hade nu hakun gisot a. Boni di ahala nuhni no haskane baba yetithil ombalda yelti. Ayerdultu eltia neha. Nag enuhni daidan tikuya kuhanisa adur school around de hadonal time ay adi eltila jo there's a kunara tum hunok enilye edali a eltila jai ayer kwe nuhni aralu lu hanoder la kudwe asi lan horaniu nuhni dino habado on eltarelye ha ai ad no haskana nuhni horrible da yeltiu da oli dani tani ayer deni dana zwan hunyala wa onk etani hanunit elu no hapaselye ha so nuhni no hananik a huno hakwan nuhni harserelia jade alu asibor nuna zun hala.
Okay, in closing, Jackie, maybe in English, my granddaughter back there, if there's any way you want to leave a message to that generation of our grandkids, you know, a legacy of knowledge for them, what would you share in English?
For our young people, what I would like to share is don't be scared to ask for help. And back in the day when, I'm going to give my age away. In my time, when you are young, it was like your thoughts and your feelings didn't matter because you're young and you would get over it. But now in today's world, we understand that young people are vulnerable, and a lot of our young people are targeted at such a young age. So my message to the young people would be, do not be afraid to reach out. We are here to help you. We are not here to judge you. And if you don't know any of the numbers to the victim services or you're in a panic, just go to a detachment and tell them what your situation is, and we are here to help you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, because we always have our phones with us and we're always here to help.